MS Now's David Noriega is in Minneapolis. MS Now national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg is a former assistant special agent in charge of the FBI. And Catherine Christian is a former assistant DA in Manhattan and an MS Now legal analyst. Catherine, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said they have never had to go to court to force the federal government to preserve evidence. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never. It's unusual because it's just a given that a government agency, the FBI, DOJ, DHS, would never destroy evidence that's needed for a case. It shows the lack of trust between Minnesota and the federal government.
So, Michael, the Hennepin County DA's office confirmed today that state investigators only got access to the shooting scene itself on Sunday after reportedly being blocked by feds. But here's what Todd Blanche had to say about that.
After the incident happened, local law enforcement decided to come on the scene, and they lost the crime scene. Protesters and rioters overtook that crime scene. It was not federal law enforcement. It was not Border Patrol agents that did not preserve the crime scene. That is just blatantly false.
How do you even establish facts in a situation like this? Those are two, once again, diametrically opposed stories about what happened there.
I think you look to recent practices by the federal government, and what we've seen is a reluctance, if not an outright refusal, to properly investigate agent and officer involved shootings. In any normal situation, the shooters would not leave the area. In fact, they would flood it with more DHS employees to secure the scene. That did not appear to happen here, and it certainly did not appear to happen at the shooting of Renee Good.
Well, after 3 shootings, David, the tension there has been escalating. I think it's fair to say as well that the concern among many Republicans is escalating, and the president just posted about talking to the governor. What do we know about that?
Yeah, Chris, let's start with that conversation between the president and the governor. I'm going to read for our viewers the beginning of the president's post on Truth Social about that conversation and then talk about it a bit. He says, Trump says, Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I told Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, and that what we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have in their possession. The governor very respectfully understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. What this potentially signals, Chris, without getting ahead of ourselves, this in combination with the fact that Trump has sent Tom Homan here, it seems to supplant Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino, who has been leading the operation here, is that there might be a change in tactics, potentially a de-escalation in the tactics that we've seen here since Operation Metro Surge started in December. And just to explain to you a little bit the backdrop against which this is happening, Chris, and to explain to you also why I'm standing where I'm standing, this is a church in Minneapolis that has, for a couple of months now, been helping immigrant families that are sheltering in place because of the fear that they feel, given these indiscriminate raids by federal law enforcement, by sending them, packing and sending them the kinds of food and basic supplies that you see behind me. There's actually a large number of volunteers here right now. I want to say somewhere between 50 and 100 volunteers, but I can't show you them because many of them asked not to be on camera because they are very afraid of being targeted and retaliated against by the federal government for, Chris, I should say, work that is frankly completely innocuous. These are volunteers at a church packaging food to take to families who have requested help from the church. But that is the kind of activity that community organizers, activists, and regular Minnesotans who have come out to form part of the community response to this, this series of aggressive tactics by federal immigration enforcement have come out in great numbers to take part in. And a lot of people are very afraid. I can tell you that, Chris. I've been speaking to a number of people who are deeply involved in these community organizing efforts. They've told me that a lot of the Signal chat groups, for example, that they use to coordinate not just the ICE Watch patrols, but also this kind of mutual aid work that we're seeing here today, have been infiltrated by people who identify themselves either as federal agents or right-wing antagonists. And there's one last thing that I want to read to you, Chris, because this is a message that one of these infiltrators left in one of these Signal groups that somebody sent to me, and it's fairly chilling. And these are the kinds of threats that people are receiving for doing this kind of community work. So let me just read this, and then I'll toss it back to you. It says, to the people of the Signal group, you now have more than 5,000 patriots following you. Wherever you go, we will be there. You will be snatched up and thrown in the prepared hole we have. Those are the kinds of messages that people are getting. Those are the reasons people are afraid. But I'm also hearing from a number of people, activists, organizers in the community, that they intend to remain defiant in the face of this kind of intimidation, Chris.
Thank you so much for that reporting. But Catherine, it has been escalating. The reports we hear about the fear that is in the community when it's reached into a church where people who are doing what they believe is God's work are worried about retaliation. And again, fill us in then, knowing that this is what's happening on the ground. Fill us in on the arguments from this morning's hearing on whether this surge of ICE personnel violates the 10th Amendment.
Well, first of all, the 10th Amendment states that the Constitution, if the federal government has been given those rights, then they are reserved for the states. So what Minnesota is arguing is that the federal government has caused chaos. Stores have been closed. Kids are not going to school. They have alleged that the ICE agents have stopped, in some instances, fire enforcement. And they are alleged that's retaliation. AG Bondi, Attorney General Bondi, sent a letter this weekend saying, if you do these three things, stop your sanctuary policies, give us your Minnesota voting rolls, and give us your data on Medicaid and SNAP benefits, we might back down. They are arguing, Minnesota, that shows that's basically a ransom note. Now, the judge has indicated she's a little wary of telling the federal government how they should run their immigration policy. The hearing isn't over yet. She hasn't made a decision, but it might be very tough for Minnesota to get what they want, which is to cease immigration enforcement in Minnesota or to have the judge limit the number of federal agents who are on the ground.
We do know, Catherine, that President Trump told the Wall Street Journal ICE will leave Minnesota, quote, at some point. And then we got this information about the phone call that he said happened. We are still waiting to hear from Governor Walz about how he reads that phone call. But meantime, state officials who had their hearing today are pleading with the judge to pull the plug now, writing, we need the court to act to stop this before yet another resident dies because of Operation Metro Surge. Emergency relief is not only warranted, it is essential. So how do you expect this to play out?
Well, right now, the federal government is making their argument. The judge has indicated it's very tough for her because a judge decides the law. The judge does not dictate the government's policy. So there's hopefully, this hearing could end with the governor and the president coming to a recognition that what's happening is not working. And just in terms of the optics, and two people, let's not forget, have been killed. Whether it was murder or not, that will be determined by the courts. But two people have been killed because of this enforcement.
And a third shot as well. Michael, this morning's hearing was also about tactics. A New York Times video analysis of the Preddy shooting found that 10 shots were fired, including 6 while he was laying motionless on the ground. Is there any law enforcement training, any protocol that calls for action like that?
No, not particularly. You are trained to shoot until the threat is eliminated. And that could be when, one shot accomplishes that. Sometimes it takes more. But based on everything we've seen, every video that's been released, all the footage that the media has provided, I'm not quite sure that he ever was a threat from the beginning of the encounter till the moment he lost his life. He was attempting to assist somebody who had been pepper sprayed, and he was tackled, beaten, and shot. At no point does he have a weapon in his hand. At no point does he appear to be using his fists to fight back. This looks less to me like law enforcement and more like a secret police's execution.